Welcome back to Anime Realm. This is my recap for the anime The Beginning After the End. If you enjoy my recaps, please think about subscribing. In a cruel twist of fate, the most feared and merciless ruler of a dystopian world finds himself reborn not as a conqueror, but as a helpless infant in a medieval ice-sky realm. As his newborn eyes flutter open, he is met with the warm gazes of a man and woman, their faces alight with joy. They look down at him with boundless affection, marveling at how he resembles them both, their voices filled with love as they celebrate the birth of their cherished son. The father, Reynolds, decides to name him Arthur and immediately tries to get the baby to call him Papa. The mother, Alice, laughs and says he's still way too young for that. While the two of them goof around with their new child, Arthur is just lying there confused. He has no clue who these freaking people are or why they're acting like they're his damn parents. If they're telling the truth, then that means he died in his old life and somehow got reborn with memories intact. Gazing up at the starry night sky, Arthur can hardly believe that after his countless victories and ruthless world domination, the Supreme Being has reduced him to a feeble infant. It's humiliating. And the worst part, he has to burp like a baby now, and the secondhand embarrassment is unreal. It's not that he hates this new life. His parents are caring, and they seem genuinely happy to have him, but that doesn't change how uncomfortable he feels. Diapers are annoying, and there's always this nagging fear that someone might try to hurt him while he's helpless. So the only thing he can do to stay on guard is to clench his tiny fist. Reynolds sees this and smiles, thinking it's adorable. He slips his finger into Arthur's little hand and calls Alice over to show her how much their son loves him. Arthur, meanwhile, is still struggling to move, and in the middle of all that effort, he accidentally poops himself. Now his mom has to deal with it, and the shame hits so hard that he almost tears up. He just wants this absurd dream to be over. But it's not a dream, it's real, and this is the new life he's stuck with. Still, things take a strange turn when Arthur notices something unusual. Reynolds suddenly uses magic to boost his strength. Just like that, his body surges with power, and then Alice steps in, using healing magic on him like it's second nature. Arthur's never seen anything like it. Magic didn't exist in his world, so watching it happen right in front of him is fascinating. He wants to understand it, but for now, he knows he has to grow up first. Later, Reynolds heads into the forest and takes down a beast using his strengthening magic. Not long after that, a few of his friends show up to hang out. Back to our baby hero. Since there isn't much else for him to do, he starts analyzing everything around him. He pays attention to every little detail and soaks in as much information as possible, because if there's one truth that holds across every world, it's that knowledge is power. Reynolds eventually returns home after his hunting trip, and Arthur finds himself wondering whether this society allows everyone to carry weapons. If that's the case, then it must mean the outside world is dangerous enough to make it necessary. That only confirms to him that he needs to get stronger fast because adapting is his only option. There's so much he wants to ask, but his body isn't ready for that yet. Still, in the middle of all his frustration, there's a part of him that feels happy. His new parents give him moments that feel pure, something his old life never allowed. In his previous world, Arthur never even had the luxury of sleeping peacefully. Assassination attempts came with the job, and every night was another risk. But now, for the first time, he feels something close to peace, and little by little, he gets used to it. After days, weeks, and perhaps even months pass, Arthur learns to crawl, and the first thing he does is head straight for a mirror, just to check how handsome he looks. Once he gets used to moving around and has full control of his body, he starts sneaking out of bed whenever his parents aren't watching, and his destination is always the library. He picks up books one by one, eager to learn more about this world. That's how he finds out that the continent he was born into is called Dicathen. Dicathen is made up of 3 kingdoms: the Darv Kingdom, where the dwarves live; the Elenoir Kingdom, hidden deep within a forest and ruled by elves; and finally, the Sapin Kingdom, where humans reside, including Arthur himself. Although Arthur's nation is a monarchy, its throne is inherited, unlike his previous world, where power could be seized by killing the reigning king. Once he's got the basics down, Arthur shifts his focus. He wants to understand magic, so in a surprisingly cute way, he reaches up and pulls a book on the subject from the shelf. The further he reads, the more more he starts comparing this world to his old one. His past life was more advanced, more industrial. This one is simpler. But the presence of magic, or as this world calls it, mana, changes everything. According to the book, mana isn't something just anyone can use. It's passed down through generations and only appears in about 1 out of every 100 people. There are only 2 main forms: augmenting, which enhances the body with mana, and conjuring, which enables one to project and manipulate energy in endless ways. While reading, Arthur recalls the healing magic his mother used earlier, and it clicks she's clearly a conjurer. According to the book, everyone with mana has a mana core, and most spellcasters only learn to tap into it around puberty. Once they master that, they can become full-fledged mages. Arthur thinks it sounds an awful lot like the concept of Kai, something he knew well in his past life, yet he remains skeptical about whether this arcane knowledge will serve as an effective weapon for him. Still, he decides to try, so he focuses and channels whatever remnants of his Kai he thinks he still has. And just as he starts feeling something shift, Alice swoops in out of nowhere, picks him up like the precious baby she believes he is, and takes a good look at him. At first, Arthur panics, thinking she's caught on to what he was trying to do. But no, it's worse because she announces that he's pooped himself, and the stench confirms it. As Alice takes him to get cleaned up, Arthur lies there in silent agony. He's sick of being trapped in this weak body, and the humiliation is endless. He swears to himself again that he needs to gain power and fast. Later, Alice spends some quiet time journaling his milestones. She's genuinely proud of how quickly he's developing. But one thing still bothers her: he hasn't smiled, not even once. And that thought hits her harder than she expected. She looks out the window, eyes landing on Reynolds outside, swinging a wooden sword with Arthur in his tiny hands. Reynolds calls out to her, beaming as he brags about Arthur's progress. But instead of being impressed, Alice is pissed. She storms outside and scolds him loudly, saying it's way too soon for their son to be handling weapons. Reynolds tries to explain, but it's no use. Alice doesn't want her baby playing soldier just yet. In contrast, Arthur absorbs every detail of the scene, using his parents' interactions as a framework to comprehend the complexities of marriage, though he begins to wonder if perhaps in this strange new world, women might be the ones really in charge. Later that day, Alice takes Arthur to the market, and everything there blows his tiny mind. Every corner, every sound, every item feels like a brand new piece of information, especially when half this stuff didn't even exist in his old world. He even gets to witness magic being used up close, and that alone makes the whole trip worth it. Then on the way home, as sleep gradually overtakes him, Arthur reflects on how much his family has supported him. They finally make it back home, and Alice carries Arthur straight to his room. On the way, she talks softly about how proud she is whenever he sneaks out of bed just to read, or how curious he gets every time they go to the market. She's convinced he inherited those traits from Reynolds. Then she chuckles to herself, saying he might grow up and run off to explore the world, but deep down, she hopes he gets to live a quieter, safer life. That evening, Arthur sits nearby and watches Reynolds practice magic in the yard. At first, he's excited, thinking he finally has someone to learn from firsthand. He watches as Reynolds lifts a few small rocks with his magic, and that makes Arthur change his mind. But before the disappointment sets in too deep, Alice shows up behind him and assures him Reynolds is just warming up. She tells him to keep watching, and sure enough, Reynolds amps up his mana and starts pulling off some serious moves. Watching all this, Arthur quickly figures out that his father is an augmenter, someone who uses mana to enhance his physical strength and skills. That gets him fired up, and he starts imagining all the cool tricks he could pull off once he gets his own mana core. But just as he's getting into the fantasy, Alice scoops him up and tells him it's bedtime. On the way to his room, he spots a book on the shelf and immediately starts pointing at it. Whining for her to let him read, she tries to resist, but after a few seconds of watching his adorable face light up, she gives in and lets him read it for a bit. As he flips through the pages, he reminds himself of everything he's learned so far, every little step that might help him form his own mana core. He closes his eyes and starts drawing mana from every part of his body toward a single point. He works diligently, and just when his parents assume he has already fallen asleep, a loud explosion rocks the house. Without hesitation, Reynolds throws himself over Alice and takes the blast across his back. Burned and dazed, he quickly checks that she's okay, and when she nods, they both remember Arthur. They run inside, and what they see nearly stops their hearts because Arthur is floating in mid-air, and he is calmly descending like it's nothing. In that heart-stopping moment, the roof above begins to crumble, and being just a child, Arthur is unable to dodge in time. Yet his parents leap into action, shielding him from what could have been a fatal collapse. Overcome with relief and emotion, all three burst into tears, and for the first time, Arthur feels the warm, unyielding love and protection of his parents, a stark contrast to the cold loneliness of his past life, and that realization moves him to tears for the first time. The story then shifts to Arthur's previous life, where he once held the throne as King Grey. During his reign, a servant from the royal court was caught conspiring to end his life. By royal decree, such betrayal demanded swift execution. Yet, instead of bloodshed, the council chose a more restrained judgment, banishing the traitor along with his entire bloodline to their native land. The traitor knows full well they'd face something far worse than death once they arrived, so he gets panicked and desperate, and dropped to his knees and begged Grey to show mercy and spare his wife and daughter. But Grey, without even a word, killed them right in front of him. It wasn't revenge, it was a twisted act of mercy because he knew death by his hand would be quicker than whatever hell awaited them where they were going. And somehow, the assassin, broken and hollow, genuinely thanked Grey for it. Now, in his new life, Arthur has just turned 4. He's spending time with his father Ray, who gives him a pair of combat gloves, exact replicas of his own. But Arthur politely turns them down, saying he'll stick with his wooden sword for now, because he thinks that with his small frame, the gloves would shorten his range and make it harder for him to fight properly. Ray doesn't push it, and instead he smiles and steps into their regular sparring match. But today turns out to be different. In the middle of the fight, Arthur surprises Ray by imbuing his sword with mana, something he's never shown before, and with that sudden enhancement, he easily disarms his father. It's the first time Arthur has ever beaten him, and Ray is left frozen, stunned by how fast his son is advancing. Later that evening at dinner, Ray brings up the idea of hiring a proper instructor for Arthur. He's realized that his own training won't be enough anymore. But Alice is immediately against it because she knows hiring a tutor means sending their son away to the city all alone at just 4 years old. Ray stays firm, pointing out that Arthur can now use magic to enhance physical objects, and that kind of talent can't go untrained. The conversation quickly turns into a heated back and forth, both parents standing their ground. To stop the argument, Arthur jumps in with a compromise, and he suggests they all move to the city together. That way, Ray gets to give him the education he needs, and Alice doesn't have to be separated from her son. It's a perfect solution, and both parents agree on the spot, so they immediately start packing for their new life in the city. In a few days, Ray's old adventurer crew, the Twin Horns, arrive personally to escort Arthur and his family to the city. Arthur politely introduces himself to the group, so their leader Adam introduces himself and tells him that they've already met before, though he doubts a little kid like Arthur would remember. But Arthur remembers every detail because it was the day he accidentally blew up their house. The Twin Horns then came to help rebuild everything, and Arthur overheard the whole conversation, learning that his mom and dad were once members of this very party before they settled down. Once Adam finishes talking, Angela sweeps in and pulls Arthur into a bone-crushing hug, nearly squeezing the life out of him. Durden, the party's tank, notices the kid silently panicking and gently pulls him away from her grip. That's when Arthur catches sight of someone watching him from the roof of the carriage, a quiet girl with an unreadable expression. Her name is Jasmine, and she doesn't say a word, just keeps staring at him. Arthur, for a moment, gets completely lost in her eyes, until Helen strolls over, shakes his hand with a bright smile, and introduces both herself and Jasmine on her behalf. Then, with the introductions over, the group sets off on their journey to Xyrus City. During the ride, Arthur can't help but think how outdated this transportation is compared to what he knew in his previous life, where flying vehicles were the standard. Still, he doesn't really mind, not when his loving mom is sitting right there beside him, chatting away and making the trip feel like home. They take plenty of breaks along the way, and during one of those stops, they're suddenly ambushed by a pack of wild wolves. For the first time, Arthur sees up close how brutal the outside world really is. But Jasmine reacts first, stepping in without hesitation. She leaps into action, daggers flashing, taking the monsters down like it's nothing. Then Ray, Adam, and the others quickly jump in to handle the rest. Arthur doesn't join in. He just watches, and the whole scene fires him up. So he's determined to fight beside them one day. That night, they all gather around for dinner. But Arthur notices something strange. His mom hasn't touched her plate. She says she's already full, but something doesn't feel right. She then spots a wound on Ray's arm, so she instantly walks over to heal him. And the moment she starts casting the spell, the energy in the group changes. Everyone suddenly becomes tense, quietly scanning the area, shielding her from any wandering eyes. It's then that Arthur starts putting the pieces together. Healing magic isn't just uncommon here, it's a huge deal. And the real reason his family had been living way out in the middle of nowhere wasn't just to live quietly. It was to keep Alice's rare healing abilities hidden from the world. After the meal, Adam pulls Arthur aside, curious to see firsthand if Ray's been exaggerating his son's abilities. The rest of the party is just as intrigued by the so-called prodigy, so they gather around to watch, turning what was supposed to be a quiet moment into a full-blown spectacle. Arthur, still just 4 years old, silently wonders if anyone's the least bit concerned about him getting hurt. But this will be his first time facing an opponent other than his dad, and unlike Ray, who only used a practice stick, Adam shows up wielding a real spear. But even if it's wrapped in cloth to dull the edge, it's still a proper weapon. The match kicks off without delay. Adam channels mana into his spear right away, and Arthur instantly responds, infusing mana into his body too. But he doesn't stop there. He surges magic into his legs, boosting his speed to a whole new level. In a blink, Arthur launches forward, slipping right between Adam's legs and landing a clean hit before springing back to create distance. The crowd goes silent, absolutely stunned by his lightning-fast movement and spot-on precision. As the duel heats up, they clash again, but this time head-on. But it becomes painfully obvious that there's still a huge gap in sheer power. Arthur doesn't have the muscle to keep up, and Adam's next blow sends him flying. The force behind the strike throws him through the air like a ragdoll, and right then, Arthur gets a harsh reminder. This small body of his just isn't built for direct hits. But before he slams into the ground, Angela swiftly casts wind magic to catch him midair, gently lowering him to safety. Durden then immediately steps in and scolds Adam for going way too hard on a little kid, and he reminds him they were supposed to be sparring, not trying to launch Arthur into orbit. Adam raises both hands in apology, admitting that he got a little too into it, but only because the little monster's technique totally threw him off guard. So he asks Ray what kind of damn brutal training regimen he put this kid through to make him this dangerous at just 4 years old. But Ray says that he doesn't do shit. A few steps away, Arthur notices Jasmine staring him down with that unblinking intensity of hers. She bluntly asks how the hell he fights like that and demands he teach her. And judging by her completely deadpan expression, Arthur realizes she's not going to drop this until she gets what she came for. The following morning, the group resumes their trip and eventually stops at a calm, open stretch where Arthur can squeeze in some more training. Adam takes this chance to give him some spear lessons, while Ray flexes his dad bod with some old-school workout poses, and the poor kid just humors him anyway. After that, Helen steps in for a quick archery session. And before long, Arthur's nailing bullseyes like he's been doing it for years. With training wrapped up, it's finally Jasmine's turn. She'd been waiting for this moment, and surprisingly, she picks up on his teaching quicker than expected. Later that evening, Arthur is quietly reading a book when Jasmine starts staring at him like she's been hypnotized by a face that doesn't even try to be charming. A few minutes later, it's not just a stare, it's borderline stalker behavior. The next morning rolls around, and it's Arthur's birthday. Jasmine, of all people, gives him a dagger as a present. To everyone's shock, especially the other girls, she even goes out of her way to explain how to properly use it. Adam, being the only single guy in the group, and having clearly had enough of this rom-com moment, loudly declares that it's time to hit the road. That's when Alice calls Arthur over. But just as she does, she clutches her stomach and clearly looks like something's wrong. Arthur sees right through her weak smile and asks what's going on, but she brushes it off, insisting she's okay, even though the way she says it doesn't convince him one bit. As they continue on, their peaceful journey is suddenly interrupted by a full-on bandit ambush. Without wasting time, everyone hops off the carriage and braces for a fight. Then a hail of arrows rains down, but Angela steps up and throws up a magic barrier to protect them. Arthur then peers outside and quickly realizes they're surrounded from all directions. Meanwhile, the bandit leader, who frankly looks like his head got squashed into a cube, orders his crew not to kill the women and children because he plans to sell them off for a nice chunk of change. The bandits then charge with zero hesitation, and though Alicia is visibly shaken, she tries to keep Arthur calm. Then, before the attackers get too close, Durden blasts a few of them back, and Ray meets them head-on, knocking thugs out left and right. One nearly lands a blow on Ray, but Helen's arrow intercepts him straight through the chest. Adam also tears through enemies with his spear like a hot knife through butter, and Jasmine takes down her share with clean, precise dagger strikes. Watching the twin horns fight like this, Arthur realizes just how strong each one of them really is. But the problem isn't skill, it's numbers. The bandits just keep coming, wave after wave, so eventually the group begins to tire, and the pressure builds. Then, with a brutal hit, Ray gets slammed into the carriage and collapses, motionless. That's when the bandit leader, with his smug face and evil smile, starts making his way toward Alice and Arthur. Watching Ray laid out like that, Arthur and his mom instantly jump out of the carriage in a panic. But before they can get closer, Ray regains consciousness and tells them to hold their ground. He may be bruised and barely standing, but he's still trying to play the hero. He turns to Arthur and tells him to take his mother and get out of there fast. Of course, Arthur, being the stubborn little guy he is, insists on staying and fighting alongside them. But Ray cuts him off and finally says the words that stop him cold: Alice is pregnant. That one sentence answers every question Arthur had about her recent weakness, and suddenly everything clicks. With no time to waste, Ray looks him in the eye and says he trusts Arthur to protect both his mother and his little brother she's carrying. So Arthur snaps into gear, grabs Alicia's hand, and takes off raining like hell. Behind them, the bandit boss, loudmouthed and still full of fight, shouts at his crew to stop them. But just as they're about to catch up, Ray charges into the fray, giving Arthur and Alice the seconds they need. At the same time, just as it looks like Arthur and Alice might be caught, knives fly through the air, and it was Jasmine and Adam who stepped in to clear the path like pros. In moments, the whole Twin Horns crew is locked in battle again, holding off the attackers while Arthur and his mother escape. As they flee, Arthur thinks back on the life he once had, the life of a man who had taken countless lives without flinching. And now here he is, terrified of losing someone he actually cares about. The irony of it twists in his chest, so he clenches his fists. But there's nothing his tiny body can do but keep running like hell. Suddenly, Arthur senses something, danger from above. He glances up and spots a shady figure on a ridge, preparing to launch a spell. Acting fast, he shoves his mother out of the way. The blast nails him squarely, knocking him off balance and sending him tumbling off the cliff's edge. As he falls, he refuses to go down alone. So with his last ounce of focus, he reaches for the dagger Jasmine gave him. The blade is tied to a cord, so he hurls it upward with precision, and it wraps around the enemy's leg, dragging the caster down with him. Meanwhile, Durden and Angela try to save Arthur using their magic, but he's already too far out of range. As he plummets, Arthur reflects on everything. Then he looks up at his mother, her arms outstretched, reaching for him like she could somehow pull him back. Her eyes fill with panic, her face streaked with tears, because the idea of losing her son makes her heart break. But Arthur otherwise is glad that he could protect his mom, even if it costs him everything. Still, part of him wishes he'd gotten the chance to meet his little brother. But then, against all odds, we see at night that he did survive the fall. Gasping for breath, bruised and dazed, Arthur opens his eyes and finds himself face to face with an enormous, terrifying beast calling him by his name. And just like that, a new nightmare's only getting started. Arthur panics the moment he lays eyes on the towering creature standing over him. He has no freaking idea where he is, and the way that thing's glaring at him, it feels like he's 2 seconds away from becoming lunch. Figuring it's now or never, he goes in for a sneak attack to try and get the upper hand, but the creature just smacks him aside like he's nothing and tells him to calm down. Says it's not some evil beast and just wants to be friends. But let's be real, last time a stranger pulled the let's be friends card, someone ended up in the back of a van. So let's just say Arthur's trust levels aren't exactly high. Anyway, the kid's still a mess because his body's beaten up bad, and he's not getting better unless he eats something. So the creature casually plucks a bunch of fruit growing from the cave walls and tells him to eat up. but he hesitated. Wall fruit didn't exactly scream safe to eat, and he was already suspicious. So Arthur tried to get up and talk his way out of the situation, but the second he moved, a sharp snap echoed from his body. So he collapsed back to the ground, overwhelmed with pain, and just started crying. The monster just sighs and tells him to quit whining. Honestly, it's a miracle he even survived that mountain drop. Arthur wanted to ask questions, but the creature made it clear it wasn't answering anything until he ate. So with no better option, Arthur grabs one of the fruits and takes a bite. And to his surprise, it was actually pretty good, that he wolfing down handfuls like they were candy. And once he's full, he turned back to the creature and asked if it knew anything about his parents or what happened after the attack. The creature explained that it couldn't leave the cave, but it had a special ability to observe the outside world. To prove it, it projected a screen in front of Arthur, showing him that his parents had defeated the bandits and left several days ago. So Arthur's eyes welled up again, but this time from relief that his parents were alive. He thanks the creature for showing him, and since he was going to be stuck here recovering for a while, he decided to stop being so hostile. The creature introduced itself as Sylvia, and despite how terrifying she looked, she turned out to be gentle and kind. Then over the next few days, Arthur remained in the cave, eating and resting while his body slowly healed. Sylvia stayed by his side the entire time, watching over him without asking for anything in return. And once Arthur was finally full recovered, the only thing on his mind was getting back home. But Sylvia quickly shut that idea down. According to her, there's no way Arthur would make it on his own. The cave they're in is right on the edge of Elshire Forest, and that part of the forest is crawling with dangerous magical beasts and the kind of bandits that make the ones who attacked his family look like amateurs. So if he tries to leave now, he's not going to make it. But that doesn't mean he's stuck here forever, because Sylvia explains that she has the ability to create a dimensional rift, something that could teleport Arthur to a safer location, maybe even all the way home. But the problem was it would take her a long time to generate it. So until that portal's ready, he's got no choice but to wait. With nothing else to do, Arthur grabs a stick and starts swinging it around. If he's stuck here anyway, might as well get in some sword training. Days pass, and although he still doesn't know much about Sylvia, he's grown to enjoy her company. All he really knows is that she looks like a terrifying monster, and she's clearly hiding from something or someone, but despite everything, she's one of the kindest people he's ever met. After another round of training, Arthur takes a break. He walks over to a flat rock, sits down, and starts working on channeling his mana. Sylvia watched for a while, quietly impressed. He was just a kid, yet he already had a mana core. But from the way he was going about it, it was obvious he hadn't received proper training. Without a word, Sylvia lifts her hand, and suddenly, a swirling mass of mana gathers in her palm. Arthur's jaw nearly hits the floor because it's not just that she's casting a spell. It's the fact that she's gathering mana while she's casting. So if he could learn to control mana like that, there's no doubt he'd become incredibly powerful. But before he could ask her to teach him, Sylvia stopped and looked over at him. She wanted to know what he planned to do with that kind of power if he learned it. Arthur hadn't really thought about it before, but now that she brings it up, one memory burns in his head: those bandits. How close they came to killing his family. How powerless he felt. So without thinking, he tells her flat out, he'll use that power to wipe out anyone who dares to hurt the people he loves. Sylvia didn't like what she heard, and without a word, she walked over and flicked Arthur on the forehead, knocking him back, and tells him straight that she'd never teach that technique to someone driven by thoughts like that. Arthur sat there, holding his head, still not understanding what the problem was. Because to him, after what happened to his family, wanting to protect them by any means felt right. Sylvia wants to make something clear, so she gently presses a single finger against Arthur's forehead and calmly tells him she could just as easily crush his skull with it, or touched him with care, like she just did. Then she asked him which one he'd rather experience. Obviously, Arthur chose the gentle touch. So she explained that anger and hatred are easy paths to walk. But once you start down that road, it never ends, it just consumes everything. She didn't want that for him, and she didn't want him to waste his life chasing revenge. So she asked again what would he do with this power. Arthur took a moment, and this time, instead of thinking about the fear and violence he'd faced, he pictured the faces of the people he loved, the ones who made him smile. And with that image in his heart, he answered that he wanted strength so he could protect them. So Sylvia smiled because that was the answer she'd been hoping for. But elsewhere outside the cave, another creature was drawing near. one that looked an awful lot like Sylvia. It had been tracking her, and now it was close. Back in his old world, Arthur had been a king, but not in the way most people imagine. The senators held the real power, and he was just their weapon, a pawn used to wage wars and silence enemies, and that life had left him hollow because he hated being used like that. Back in the present, Sylvia was helping him shape a different future. She began teaching him her technique, showing him how to draw in ambient mana and condense it. Arthur followed along, and after a few tries, he managed to pull in the mana and use it to boost his body. The power was incredible. He could feel it pulsing through him. He ran to Sylvia, full of excitement, ready to thank her. But then everything shifted, and Sylvia's eyes narrowed because she sensed something. And without even a damn warning, she shoved Arthur into a pile of rocks and whispers for him to stay hidden and quiet. Arthur peeked through the cracks and spotted another creature approaching, a massive beast, almost identical to Sylvia. Sylvia clearly knew him, and from the way she tensed up, Arthur could tell this wasn't a friendly visit. The stranger didn't waste time and demanded Sylvia come with him, but she refused, so without another word, the other beast launches an attack. Arthur wanted to jump in, but he suddenly heard Sylvia's voice in his head. She told him to stay back, and she would handle this. The other dragon tried to reason with her one last time, said he didn't want to kill her, but would if he had to. But Sylvia's answer was clear. She would rather die on her feet than listening to his freaking voice. She then unleashed her full power, and in that moment, Arthur saw her true form, a dragon pulsing with energy, and in this form, she can unleash everything she's got. Sylvia then launches a massive blast straight at the other creature. He manages to block it, but tells her she's being reckless because if her body in this condition, using that much power will kill her. Sylvia already knows that, but she just doesn't care because she's lived a long life and has no regrets. Then with one strong push, she slams the other monster into the wall, but he's not down for good, and he gets right back up and starts hammering her with a barrage of magical blasts. She takes the hits hard, but right now, she's more concerned about Arthur. This battle is getting way too close to the place she stashed him. The enemy then fires off one last heavy shot, and she can't dodge it without risking Arthur's life. So she draws on every last drop of power and freezes time itself. While everything is frozen, she tells Arthur to come out from hiding, and he listens. It looks safe enough, but he's full of questions, especially after seeing that she's actually a dragon. Still, there's no time for answers because her time freeze spell is running out fast, and she needs to move him now. She opens the dimensional rift she had been building, but since she's injured and never got the chance to finish the spell properly, the portal connects to some random place instead of his home. She really didn't want to dump him in the forest, but at this point, there's no other choice. Even so, she trusts Arthur. With what he's learned from her, she believes he can handle himself and make it back on his own. But before she sends him off, she asks him again what he plans to do with his power. Arthur doesn't even pause and tells her that he'll use it to protect the people he loves. That answer puts her at ease, and she's glad he finally understands. Before he goes, there's one last thing she wants to give him. Sylvia conjures an egg and a single feather, placing them gently in front of him. She asks him to wrap the egg in the feather and keep it safe no matter what. Then, with the last of her strength, she transfers her will onto Arthur's body, marking both of his arms with strange glowing symbols. Arthur looked down, stunned by the sudden appearance of the glowing marks because they stretched from his shoulders to his wrists like full-sleeve tattoos, pulsing faintly with mana. But Sylvia doesn't have the energy to explain what they mean, and she simply tells him that one day, he'll understand how to use them. But by then, she won't be around to show him how. Sylvia also apologizes to Arthur, because the truth is, she could have sent him back to his family the moment he showed up. But she was just enjoying his company so much that she didn't want to let him go. And now, because of that selfish choice, she ended up putting him in danger. Arthur feels awful because he knows there's nothing he can do to save Sylvia from dying here, even after everything she taught him. He doesn't care that she's a dragon, or a monster, or whatever else people might call her because he sees her as family. He tells her she feels like a mom to him. But Sylvia gently reminds him that he already has one. So Arthur smiles and says she can be his grandma instead. Sylvia didn't see that coming, but the moment he says it, her heart melts, so she asks him to say it again, and he does happily. Sylvia's heart breaks knowing she won't get to see him again, but time is running out, so she gently nudges him forward toward the portal. Arthur gets it, so he picks up the gifts she gave him and walks toward the rift. but at the very last second, he turns around and tries to coax her into coming with him. Sylvia doesn't budge because she can't, so she shuts the portal and sends him away. Time then unfreezes, and the enemy's blast slams straight into her. The hit looks devastating, and Sylvia crashes to the ground. But the other monster isn't convinced she's dead. He knows she's way too powerful to go down from just that. He steps in closer, lowering his guard. But it's a big mistake because as soon as he's in range, Sylvia summons everything she's got left and lets out one last attack. The blast wipes him out, along with everything around him for a full mile. As Arthur gets pulled through the dimensional rift, he hears Sylvia's voice one last time. She asks if he remembers what she said about how power should be used, and Arthur does. But his heart is heavy, so Sylvia tells him the world's a sad place, and stuff like this is going to happen. But that's exactly why he needs to change it. Arthur protests because there's no way he could ever pull that off. But Sylvia isn't expecting him to change the world overnight. One step at a time, that's all it takes. Besides, this isn't his first time shaping a world, and she knows who he used to be. Sylvia is aware of his past life as a king, and while she didn't agree with how he ruled back then, she believes that as long as he doesn't lose himself to hate, Arthur can become the kind of king this world actually needs. Then a little while later, Arthur wakes up on the ground, dazed and aching, but one thought is burned into his soul. He's going to keep his promise to her. But first, he's got to figure out how to get out of this damn forest. But suddenly, he hears something move behind him. And suddenly, a chilling scream cuts through the silence of the woods. It's high-pitched, panicked, and unmistakably from a young girl. And without wasting a second, he surges mana into his legs and launches himself in the direction of the cry. He vaults up into a tall tree to get a clearer look, and sure enough down below, he spots a gang of filthy bandits yanking a terrified young elf girl through the underbrush. She tried to escape, but they've already got her, and one of them has his hand clamped over her mouth to shut her up. And since she's an elf, they're planning to sell her on the black market for a huge profit once they leave the forest. So they tie her up and toss her into the back of their carriage like cargo. Watching all this shit, Arthur is hit with flashbacks, memories of the moment he and his family were attacked by bandits too. He remembers hearing those bastards talking about keeping him and the women alive to sell later, and it makes his blood boil. His first instinct is to slaughter every last one of them for what they're doing. But then Sylvia's voice echoes in his mind, reminding him to keep his anger in check. He closes his eyes, takes a breath, and regains his focus. Charging in now could get the girl killed, and he knows it. So he holds back, watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. Once the bandits all pile into their carriage and start heading out of the forest, Arthur silently follows, sticking to the shadows. By the time night falls, they've stopped to set up camp since it's too dark to keep going. Arthur sits nearby, hidden, still debating whether he should trail them until they reach a town or just take them out here. But then he overhears one of the scumbags talking about how elves are his favorite, and how they should get a taste of her before selling her off. That's it. Arthur knows he can't let this go on. But it's not quite time yet because he still needs full cover of darkness before making a move. So he closes his eyes and starts meditating, getting himself ready for all the blood he's about to spill. Once it's dark enough, Arthur opens his eyes, fully focused, and starts mapping out his plan. He then spots a few horned wolves chained up nearby, which is strange because no way wild beasts like that would obey humans willingly. A closer look reveals they've been forced into submission with enchanted collars, and Arthur figures he can use that to his benefit. So he picks up a few acorns and tosses them at the wolves to stir them up. The wolves' howling draws the bandits' attention, and their leader growls at one of his men to hurry over and shut those freaking beasts up. The unlucky bandit drags himself up and heads over, kicking one of the wolves hard in the neck to silence it. But in that exact moment of distraction, Arthur makes his move. He summons a mana blade, leaps down silently behind the bandit, and in a swift, brutal strike, cuts the man down where he stands. Arthur quickly grabs the guy's weapon, and just as another bandit comes over to check out the noise, Arthur jumps onto his back and slits his throat clean. That makes 2 down, but Arthur's body is already running low on steam, so he knows he can't drag this out for long. Then another bandit shows up to see what's taking so long, and Arthur rushes him, trying to land a clean kill. But he misses the vital spots, and the guy manages to scream, blowing Arthur's cover. The leader catches on fast and realizes the attacker is a mage kid, which means this fight just got a hell of a lot more complicated. Still, he doesn't want to kill the kid. Not when selling a young mage on the black market would be worth way more than the elf girl. He starts channeling magic into his arms and charges in swinging. Arthur leaps back and throws a kick to counter, but the guy dodges it with ease. Arthur tries to throw him off by hurling his knife, but the leader catches it mid-air and turns this move against him. He slams Arthur to the ground and grabs him by the ankles, lifting him up just to mock him. He laughs, telling Arthur there's no way a kid can beat an adult in raw strength. And Arthur knows he's right, so he stops trying to match power with power, and he switches back to magic. He blasts a fireball straight at the guy's knee, and while he's screaming in pain, Arthur drives the knife straight into his skull. Only one more to deal with, the wounded bandit from before, and Arthur wastes no time finishing him off. Then he heads straight for the carriage to check on the girl. She's still blindfolded, completely in the dark about what just happened. Arthur gently tells her it's okay now, the bandits are gone and she's safe. Her name is Tesha, and as Arthur helps her out of the carriage, he tells her she's free to go home. But then Tesha spots the blood on Arthur's hands and immediately starts panicking. Arthur figures it's normal, any kid would freak out after seeing that much blood. Letting her see the full aftermath might not be a great idea, so he tells Tesha to wait right there for a bit, then walks off to cover all the bodies before she sees them. Tesha then asks Arthur what happened to the ones who took her, and Arthur doesn't really want to tell her he slew them, so he just says they ran into a bit of an accident and won't be a problem anymore. The girl doesn't press any further, so Arthur grabs her things from the bandit's carriage, hands them over, and says goodbye because he still needs to make his way home. But before he can walk off, Tesha grabs his arm and begs him not to leave. She's terrified of being alone out here, scared she'll get eaten by some tree ghost or worse. Arthur asks if she at least knows the way home, and she says she does kind of. She knows the general direction, but not how long it'll take to get there. Arthur really doesn't want to go off course, but he also knows there's no way Tesha survives out here on her own. So in the end, he agrees to walk her back to her village. He glances over at the wolves the bandits were keeping and considers using them to speed things up. But he's got no clue how to actually control a wild wolf, so he figures they're better off left behind. Tesha, though, says they should at least take off the magic collars so the wolves can go free. Arthur warns her that taking them off could get her attacked, but Tesha isn't too worried. She hasn't hurt them, and as someone who lives in this forest, she feels responsible for helping the creatures that live in it. She ends up removing the collars, and sure enough, the wolves quietly walk off into the woods without causing any trouble. By the next day, Arthur and Tesha are already on the move, heading toward the direction of her village. After walking for a while, they stop to take a quick break and grab a bite to eat. Arthur cooks up a simple stew and tells her she's gotta eat, because they still have a long way to go and she'll need the energy. Tesha makes a face because the stew tastes and smells kind of weird. But hey, Arthur's no gourmet chef. The whole thing is just dried meat and salt boiled together. Not exactly 5-star, but it's better than starving. While they eat, Tesha asks why Arthur came to Elshire Forest in the first place. It's not every day a human, especially a kid, shows up around here. Arthur explains how he got separated from his family and ended up wandering into the forest. Since they're already on the subject, he asks what it's like living in the Kingdom of Elenoir, and Tesha lights up. She says she loves it. Her parents are always busy with work, so she usually spends most of her time hanging out with her grandfather and the family's servant. They keep moving along the path, but since Tesha has no clue how far her village actually is, it's tough to say how long this trip's going to take. And to make things worse, one of those wolves she let go earlier has been quietly trailing them ever since. Arthur's seriously starting to regret not just taking them all out back when he had the chance. That night, Arthur decides to stay outside the tent and keep watch. If that wolf shows up, he wants to be ready in case it tries anything. But a little while later, Tesha peeks her head out and asks Arthur to come inside and sleep. He tells her he's not tired and he'll stand guard out here, but she's clearly too freaked out to be left alone. She begs him to come inside with her, and after a little back and forth, Arthur finally gives in. He figures he can still keep watch from inside the tent anyway, just to help her feel safer. Tesha's trying to act like she isn't scared, but it's obvious, especially since she insists that Arthur stay right next to her the entire time, even when they taking their shit. Before she falls asleep, Tesha asks him something random about the human kingdom. She wants to know if it's true that all humans are perverts who marry a bunch of wives. Arthur's caught off guard and asks where she even heard that shit. And she says it was her grandpa who told her. Arthur admits some nobles have their own harem, but most humans are actually pretty decent. Tesha seems satisfied with that answer and turns over to go to sleep. Luckily, the wolf never showed up that night, so by morning, Arthur and Tesha packed up and got moving again. Over the past few days, Tesha's really started to open up to Arthur. And now that the trauma of the slave traders is fading, she actually seems happier. Still, she's totally useless in the wild. She can't even cross a small creek without help. So Arthur ends up having to carry her across like a sack of flour. Then out of nowhere, Arthur clutches his chest in pain. It hits him like a wave, and he has no idea what's happening. Tesha freaks out and runs off into the woods to find some herbs that might help. But Arthur's pretty sure this isn't some random sickness. He props himself up against a tree, barely holding it together. And that's when the same wolf from before shows up. Arthur immediately tenses up. If it attacks now, he's completely screwed. Just as things start to look bad, Tesha comes running back with the herbs, and Arthur warns her to keep her distance in case the wolf lashes out. But instead of attacking, the wolf casually walks up and drops a dead pig right in front of him, then turns around and walks away. Arthur just stares, totally thrown off. Tesha guesses that maybe the wolf was just trying to say thanks for letting it go free. That evening, Arthur and Tesha set up camp and sit down to enjoy some roasted meat by the fire. It's a major upgrade from the bland stew they had earlier, so Tesha's loving it. While she was out searching for herbs earlier, she also found a few mushrooms. She offers some to Arthur, but in hindsight, he really shouldn't have eaten the random forest mushrooms, because now he's dealing with the worst case of diarrhea imaginable. After Arthur's done practically dying in the woods, he's exhausted and ready to crash on the spot. But Tesha keeps talking to him. She starts going on about how her grandfather used to read her storybooks about the human and dwarven kingdoms. Ever since then, she's wanted to visit them. But the elders never let her because elves generally don't trust other races. Somewhere in the middle of her story, Tesha realizes Arthur isn't listening at all. He's clearly too wiped to focus, so she gently covers him with a blanket and quietly wishes him good night. And by the next day, they get back on the road. But Arthur's chest pain is getting worse with every step. Tesha feels bad for not being able to do anything to help. But Arthur tells her it's nothing to worry about. Trying to change the mood, Tesha asks if she can start calling him Artie, since they've spent so much time together, and she sees him as a close friend now. Arthur says he's cool with it, and Tesha's caught off guard by how chill he is. So he plays it up a little, joking that he'll forever treasure the fact that the great Lady Tesha now considers him a friend. That annoys her a bit, and she tells him to stop acting like a brat. Arthur fires back, saying it's rich coming from someone who wouldn't let him leave her side all night because she was scared. Tesha insists that was completely different. Still, joking aside, Arthur realizes something. Tesha's actually the first real friend he's ever had. Not just in this world, but even in his past life, he never had anyone get this close. Just then, Tesha spots something up ahead that looks familiar. She calls Arthur over to take a look. He walks over expecting her to show him a cool stick or some weird rock. But instead, he finds himself standing in front of a massive tree, with a glowing portal embedded right in the trunk. Tesha turns to him, says this is the entrance to her village, and reaches out her hand, asking Arthur to come with her inside. That concludes this episode. Thank you for watching. If you want to see the next part, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell.